Hello and welcome.
Good morning.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're thrilled to be here.
Thrilled to be here.
You look lovely.
Thank
in
you.
your
So do you.
Ruby red.
So do you, and your royal blue.
I'm trying. It's Hanukkah right now, so I was thinking about it yesterday. I wore red, and I was like, well, I try to alternate red one day and blue the next day. So
Okay. Is Hanukkah's blue?
Hanukkah's blue and silver usually.
Silver. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but good colors.
Yes.
Okay.
They're all good
Okay.
colors.
Okay.
First of all, we have to ask for an update on your lovely husband, who I saw the other day.
Yeah, he's doing well. He's in a new place that's very warm and lovely and better than the hospital. Let's just put it that way. A
Lovely
lot
for
better
that.
than, because he was at the hospital for 3 weeks and then what they call a skilled nursing facility that had a lot of chaos going on, to say the least. To say the least, yes.
Not a place where you could get a great amount of rest.
No,
No.
nor was the food particularly appetizing.
No.
So he's resting. I saw him this morning.
Yay.
Yeah, and his birthday is December 24th, which we're looking forward to.
Yes, absolutely. We have a wonderful guest who's going to be on later on in the show, a licensed marriage and family therapist, Vince Redmond. And we've asked Vince to join us to talk about trauma in light of the San Bernardino massacre, but also because, you have been so open always about having your life be something that helps other people learn from, and this is traumatic that your son has gone through an extended period of time of dad not being well,
Right.
and now dad being significantly not well,
Right, and seeing him hooked to machines and seeing him bedridden, which I have questions for Vince about, my personal situation that I think a lot of parents, be it also the death of a grandparent or the illness of a grandparent, unfortunately, many families are affected by cancer, so they do have, moms and dads going through treatments. So I wanted to talk to Vince about that, and also certainly about the San Bernardino tragedy.
Absolutely.
And just while I have a minute, we deal a lot with the regional centers, and when I heard that this was a regional center where 3 months earlier we had put on a conference, Autismo y Familia, our Spanish-speaking series, I remember you and I were in your office, and Amy came in just white as a ghost saying there was a shooting at the regional center in San Bernardino, and we all wondered, well, what could possibly have happened at a regional center?
Right.
And now, of course, we know the answer to that.
It's unthinkable. Unthinkable.
Yeah, but just to all our regional center friends who service our families here in California, I want to say our hearts are with you. We know that you're so shaken up by this. It's got to be really, really traumatic to know that in your building, or even in a building that is in the same network that you're in, that this kind of thing could happen. So we're surrounding you with our prayers and our love, and thank you for the work you do, because oftentimes the regional center is not given credit for the things they do.
Yes.
Rather than what they don't do.
Well said. Okay, so Vince is coming up in a little while, but we have a little bit in the news.
Some good stories. And some interesting.
Very interesting. Just came out yesterday. Maternal hormonal imbalance linked to child autism. This is coming to us from Stockholm.
Right.
And many of you might be aware of an imbalance called polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS. Because I certainly had that in my 30s.
Okay.
And it can create a hormonal imbalance. What they discovered in Stockholm is that women who have that are 59%. Yes, I said 59% more likely to have a child on the autism spectrum. And if you are obese and have PCOS, which, by the way, they tend to come together.
Okay.
They do. If you are both, then your percentage rate goes up even higher than 59%.
Shannon, how do you know if you have PCOS?
Well, it would be a thing that you would have symptoms, and you would be going to your gynecologist, and they would talk to you about it.
What can you tell us what some of the symptoms are?
some of the symptoms that that people will experience are really irregular menstrual periods. It could be that you're missing them, which can often be mistaken for moving into perimenopause. And sometimes women with PCOS go into perimenopause much earlier than they normally would. You might be experiencing heavy cramping along with it. You could have a particularly heavy flow with it. Things that are
it's interesting. These all sounds like signs that I had endometriosis, and it also sounds like signs of endometriosis.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that they would check you for if you were going. You would be checked for endometriosis and for polycystic. What they will typically see is they'll sometimes see what happens is that the eggs, as I recall, what was explained to me is that the eggs that you have in your ovary get a harder shell around them, and they become like cysts instead of coming out. So you might discover that you're finding a harder time getting pregnant.
I was going to say, is infertility a byproduct of this?
You could. And you might see that you have other hormonal imbalances as well. I know I experienced, we're getting real here now. I have had more hairs on my chin than I thought a woman should have. And part of that was the hormonal imbalance from the PCOS.
Okay, so this came out of Stockholm. Do you think this is a big enough alarm going off that women who are considering having a child should go and get, I imagine you can test it by an ultrasound? I don't know.
I think an ultrasound is part of it, but there are several different, they would probably do a hormonal thing.
Do you think it's something that women that are considering having a child should get tested for?
I absolutely think that it should be something that people should be concerned about. I wouldn't decide not to have a child based on this, but I was saying to somebody recently that there's a Dr. David Berger who's been on our show before, who is particularly skilled at working with women who are pregnant to identify what their risk factors are and to minimize them. And he has been wildly successful at those women not having any children with autism. And what do I mean by wildly successful? These are women who were at risk because they already had a child who was on the spectrum. Zero. They've had zero incidences of autism if they work with him.
I know he's involved in a project with Dave Humphreys, who's on the board of Act Today. This is not something, though, that necessarily your gynecologist or your gynecologist or your fertility specialist would know.
No.
Are you posting this on the website?
Yes, I did not give these links to Kelby, but I will so that we can post all of the stories
I think that's really important because you may go in and your doctor may go, I have never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, that's why I suggest talk to Dr. Berger. He's in Florida.
Okay, not everybody can access him though,
but
right?
because we've had him on and he has said that there are people that he can link with close to you so that you can have him via phone conference, telehealth, if you're working with somebody and he can help you to identify who that is.
So can I make a request that you put the study on the website and Dr. Berger's contacts?
We will do that.
Okay, for everybody out there that might have heard this story and be concerned.
Absolutely.
Okay, now a really great story out of Michigan. A photo of a young boy with Santa. It's making its way around the internet. Perhaps you've seen this.
And we've got the picture right there. Look at this Santa. That's a good Santa, isn't it?
Oh, is that the sweetest picture
ever? It is
ever?
Adorable. And that is the actual conversation when they were having conversation.
Oh, my Lord.
I know.
And, okay, so this little boy has autism, and he loves Santa, and he went in to see Santa over the weekend at a mall in Michigan, and he told Santa what he wanted for Christmas, and the Santa said he loved him. He was a good boy who walked out. The mother was waiting, said Santa. But as he was waiting for the picture that his mother was printing of him with Santa, he turned around, went back to speak to Santa again, and he said, Santa, I'm autistic. And the Santa told the boy, it's okay to be yourself. You've been very good at that. Because the little boy said he thought he might have ended up on the naughty list because of his autism. And that Santa, do we have his name? I don't see his name in
I
here.
don't think that we have the Santa's
Well,
name.
all I can say is, Santa, you did such a great thing.
It's amazing.
To tell him that he wasn't naughty for having autism. He was very special. And no, he was not on the naughty list. He was on the good list. You gave that little boy such self-esteem. And I wish that the whole world were as sensitive as whoever you are, Santa, because you really embody the real spirit of Santa.
Absolutely. I'm loving hearing all of these great Santa stories that have been coming in about autism, because this is like the third one that we've heard. Want to remind everybody we're having a Sensitive Santa event that is in conjunction with Act Today and CARD and with Skills, and We Rock the Spectrum, and My Brother Rocks the Spectrum, and that's happening on December 20th. If you're in the Los Angeles area, make sure that you register for that. You have to have a ticket, because there are a limited number of children in order to keep it a sensitive Santa, the limited number of slots for that. So Kelby's got the address right there. Make sure you register for it. Know that each child that's there gets a toy and gets some time with Santa. We want you to bring the neurotypical siblings. They need to have a ticket, so register them a ticket, but you do not need a ticket for adults. So keep that in mind. Now our last...
Wait, is Santa just coming in from the North Pole for this? Is he?
He's flying in. Cool. He's a close personal friend of
Are
mine.
the-
You know,
are the
I
ra-
used to be an elf.
I know. Are the reindeer bringing him, or is he coming a different way?
That's a secret, but it's on the 20th of December. And
Well,
it's
if
happening
you need,
at
if you need a
We
place
Rock
for the
Spectrum.
reindeer to stay, I've got connections
stables?
in the horse world and stables. Okay.
But it's happening at a We Rock the Spectrum gym in Tarzana, California. So we hope to see some of you there, because we have some good toys to give away.
Cool.
Now, last study, I thought this was really interesting, that University of California, we talk all the time about the signs of autism and things that for families to look out for. This is not anything new, but what University of California has done is condensed these 5 things down and said, here are the 5 things that parents should be aware of. Not practitioners, but parents, so that when they go into the practitioner, they can say, here's what I'm seeing and this is what my concern is. Any one of these is not necessarily mean that your child has an autism spectrum disorder, but if you see any one of these, it is worthy of having a conversation with your pediatrician. So Kelby's got them there on the screen. The first one is that your baby does not respond to his or her name, and more specifically, that they don't respond if the caregiver says it. If somebody else says it, right, that's not a big of a deal. But the person that they spend the majority of their time with, if they say their name, what you really want to see is the child orients to the caregiver, to look at them when their name is being said. And if they're not, that's something that you need to be concerned about. And it may not be autism, it might be a hearing deficit, it might be something else, but it is something to be concerned about and to talk about with your pediatrician. Do you want to take the second one?
Sure. Does your young child engage in joint attention? Joint attention refers to an activity where a child joins with another person to look at the same object or watch the same activity. So they would point, show, typical babies would point, show toys to others. They might look at a puppy and say to the parent, look at that, look at the puppy.
I'm sorry, I just was going to interrupt for a second. Whenever I go to Disneyland, this is what I watch. Because Jem didn't have this, and I didn't realize it.
I didn't realize it either. Wyatt didn't have it either, or nor did Wyatt. The first one, too, he didn't respond to his name.
Okay, interesting. But when I'm at Disneyland, I'm fascinated, and I will watch the little ones, to a year to 3 years old. And I'm absolutely fascinated, because at Disneyland, everybody's pointing and going, oh, look.
Right.
Mom goes, oh, look, there's Mickey. And I see the baby look at Mickey and then look back at Mom, and I go, there it is. There's that joint attention.
Right.
Look at, and then I
know. And
I
never
go up to
knew.
people and go, how old is your child? And they go, oh, they're like, she's a year old, but it's there. I see it all the time at Disneyland.
I know, and I never caught it. I never caught it. I never saw it in Wyatt, but I didn't know that was a sign.
Yep.
Okay, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, the next one is, does your child imitate others? This is another one. When we go places, my son and I love babies, and I always try to get a baby to smile. If there's a baby, we're in line someplace, I try to get him to smile, and I do fish lips, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see that even sometimes an 8-month-old baby will start to go, when I'm
Yeah,
doing it because
yeah.
they want to copy what I'm
Right.
doing, and it always fascinates me. So if you're if you're doing something like you're picking up a phone
Right.
and pushing the buttons,
Right.
and your child has a play phone and they're pushing the buttons, that's imitating
That's
something
good.
that you do. If they're not doing that, something to be concerned about.
Right. I would say that Wyatt, but he regressed. So, I know that during the first year, if I smiled at him and laughed, he
Yes.
laughed and smiled.
Exactly.
But it was, sometime after, it was, 13 months, 16 months, 2 years that these things, he stopped doing those things and
Yes.
was more spacey.
Yeah. And it isn't on this list, but I always say anytime there is a loss of skill,
Language in
warning
particular,
bell.
yeah, Wyatt
Warning
lost language.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the next one. You want to do it?
Yeah, does the child respond emotionally to others? Babies are responsive to others. They smile when someone smiles at them, imitates or laughs when playing with toys. When a typical child sees another child cry, they may cry themselves or act concerned. Yet a child with autism may not respond to someone's smile, invitation to play, unaware of distress or concerns of others. So that was something, Wyatt seemed to be unaware of others.
Okay. And then the last one is, does the baby engage in pretend play? And we've been talking all last week, we've talked about all the different kinds of play, and I talked about the functional pretend play aisle that you go down and you get the pretend vacuum cleaner, and the sociodramatic play where maybe you play the mom and then you switch and say, no, I'm going to be the dog or I'm going to be the dad. It's that kind of pretend play. If they want to be the doctor and they want to take the stethoscope, all of that is a really good sign. If it's not there, again, we don't panic, but it's absolutely something you should be talking about with your pediatrician. And all of these things combined, of course, make for something really important. Now, you mentioned when we talked about this on the phone last night that you said to me, are tantrums on there?
Yeah.
And you and I talked about the fact that you went to the pediatrician and said, we're having such horrible tantrums, and that it's unconscionable to me that your pediatrician just dismissed it as terrible twos.
He did.
And I think it's so important if you see that and we want to listen to our professionals and believe them, but I think you walked away from that thinking, no, I don't. Either I'm a really bad mom.
I said either I'm the world's worst mother, and I had no idea this was what having a 2-year-old child was going to be like,
Right.
Or I just happened to get Damien here in the 2
Right.
years. It was horrible. And I even had a mom who told me her child was also like that in his second year. And she advised me to spray Wyatt when he was having a tantrum, to spray him in the face with water with a spray bottle. I'm
Right.
sorry, I'm fiddling.
Yeah.
Which I did, and it so enraged him. That ended up in one of the worst tantrums of his life, and an epiphany for me, actually, because
Yes.
that's when I ended up on the floor with blood and tears and all kinds of things, holding him in my arms, praying for an answer.
For some help. Yeah.
And finally, and eventually got it, autism. But she and her kid was typical, so I thought, okay, well, this is nothing. This is
Right.
something kids do. But Wyatt had put his head through the kitchen window twice. He was having tantrums where he was scratching me and biting me, where I had to put makeup on my arms to cover it when I went out in public, because I didn't want anybody to think that my child did this to me. And those were pretty big red flags.
And I think the takeaway, though, is that if you feel like something isn't normal and you go to the pediatrician and the pediatrician says, oh, no, that's totally normal, because I think every autism parent was told that at some. I went to the pediatrician and said, how come he was talking in sentences and now he isn't? And she
Right.
said, don't worry about it.
He's
and
a boy.
He's a
Boy. You get the boy
and,
all
and
the
wait
time.
till he's 2 and he'll
If you have
talk
a
in
boy.
paragraphs. And
Right.
boys are slow to. He was already talking. It was a loss of skill, and I told her it was a loss of skill, and she told me not to worry about it. And I went home and ate my stomach lining over it because my gut said no.
Right.
And I think from both of us to all of you, if your gut says no, listen.
The other thing, though, is that oftentimes when a pediatrician says no, you breathe a sigh of relief.
Yes.
Oh, thank God. My best friend is wrong about this. My mother's wrong about this.
Right.
My mother said to me when I brought Wyatt home when he was 2, she said, something's not right here. And I said, it was horrible, because what I said to her was, you just want me to be like you and him to be like David. You want me to have a disadvantaged child like you did, a disabled child like you did. I was angry, and I lashed out at her because my brother had Down syndrome. He passed away in 1994, and her life was never typical or normal, and I felt like she wanted me to be her. And I got so angry at her when she suggested that Wyatt was different. She said he won't let me cuddle him. He won't sit in my lap. He won't look at me when I talk to him. He's not like. And she brought up my cousin's son, which of course enraged me. Yeah. So I think sometimes what we get is a validation of our denial, and don't let one pediatrician or one person, when they poo-poo something, be your final answer. Keep seeking. If you have people telling you there's something wrong here and your gut says there's something wrong here.
Absolutely. I want to say, because somebody just wrote in a question, Kelby, we need you to put up the address again for the Sensitive Santa at the We Rock the Spectrum. They're writing in saying, how do we find out more information? Where do we get the tickets, and what time is the event? So there is the address that you need to go to. It's autism-live sensitivesanta.eventbrite.com. Go there, you'll register, and there are drop-down menus for times. You need to check what times are available, because I know the slots are starting to go quickly. Register, and there'll be a way for you to register for each individual that is the child that's going to meet with Santa and get a toy. We don't have to register the adults, just the children that are going to meet with Santa, and we do want you to bring siblings, but make sure you register them. Because it's a limited number of times. Now, it goes from 9 till 2 on Sunday, December 20th, but there are only a set number of tickets available during each hour, and as those tickets go, it will sell out for that hour. We have to keep a close handle on it so that it isn't overwhelming to anybody and that nobody's having to stay in line a long time. And also, there are a set number of toys.
Right.
So that it's from 9 to 2, but the earlier you register, the more likely you'll get the time that you want.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we have Vince Redmond. We're going to talk about trauma, overcoming trauma. How do we language this with our kids? How do we move forward from things like what happened at San Bernardino last week, but also some of the other things going on in life, like some of the things that you have going on right now. So Vince will be joining us after these messages. Stick with us. Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy and I are here with our fabulous guest joining us via Skype, Vince Redmond, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Vince is an amazing regular here on our show. For those of you who have never seen Vince before, it's always great to have a licensed marriage and family therapist to help with all kinds of things, but what's particularly fabulous about Vince, well, one of the many things that's particularly fabulous about Vince, because there are many things, but Vince...
He has a fabulous wife named Debbie.
And I don't think I've actually met his wife, which is a crime as I understand it. And Vince is also very knowledgeable about soccer, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that for years, for decades, Vince was also an ABA therapist. So he was in many people's homes. In fact, he is featured in the film Recovered as one of the therapists that worked with the little girl who's in that film. So you can see him as a very young therapist working with that little girl, and then you can see him, fast forward like 15 years, and now we're that many more years down the road. But what's great about it is that Vince understands what it's like when you're doing intensive behavioral intervention, early or otherwise, because he works and has worked with adults. But then he also is able to help the family component. Because a lot of times you can go to an LMFT and say, hey, I'm having this issue, and their solution does not understand what you're doing at home with this intensive behavioral intervention. So Vince has them both. He's particularly cool that way. And we're thrilled to have you here again. Happy holidays, Vince.
You too. My pleasure. How are you ladies doing?
We're doing good. We're happy to have you. And we're going to jump right into some things that are very top of mind. First one, San Bernardino. Horrible situation. Second worst act of terrorism in our country's worst act since 9/11. I mean, this is a big deal. And it is everywhere, as we know. We found an article on the Autism Speaks website that was about, and you can reference it on the Autism Speaks website, in the Got Questions, I think is what it's called. Autism Speaks Ask Got Questions. talking to your child about tragedy. Vince, let's start with this situation and the fact that it's all over the news, and some of our children that are especially a bit older, even younger, might start asking us about it. How do we deal with it?
Well, in a couple of, I think you hit one of the first things that jumps into my mind is how old are the kids that are looking at it? What are the understanding levels of the kids that are looking at it? If we're talking younger kids or kids that don't have the capacity to really understand what's going on, my first recommendation would be, to some extent, screening it. Meaning that don't watch the news or the updates on the computers when the child's around. They're going to be confused. They're not going to understand what's going on. Plus, it might create behaviors, because there's a lot of negativity, a lot of aggression going on. This could not common, but it could create some behaviors because their anxieties are going to go up.
That's a good point. I'm a news junkie, and I'm sorry, I'm guilty of switching from CNN to MSNBC to the local news to I tape every Meet the Press, and so Wyatt is just bombarded with this because he's in the room with me. He might be on his iPad, but he's hearing it, and he actually said to me, "Mommy, why do you need to watch this?" He was angry at me because I was so glued to it, especially on Sunday. And I said, "Honey, some very bad people did some very bad things." Right. And he said, "Did they go to jail?" I'm like, "Well, no, they didn't go to jail. They're no longer with us. They got killed." And he was like, "Why did they get killed? What did they do? Did they steal something?" And the whole thing opened up, and I'm like, this is not a kid that I can explain ISIS to.
Right. And that's a good example. I mean, in Wyatt's, in that in-between where he does have the capacity to understand things and with proper explanations and going through things, but also you can see my point that if we were or filtering, I guess would be a better word, away from the kids and watching and us getting our information when the kids aren't present, we wouldn't expose them to things that are very hard to explain, that are uncomfortable. That I've always said, kids are a great barometer for anxiety and emotion. Even if they can't explain it or completely understand, they know when they're watching something that's anxious. They know when they're watching something that's negative. And that automatically creates very uncomfortable feelings within themselves that they can't explain. And we can't really explain it either because of the situations at hand. So the first thing is just, again, trying to do as much filtering as we can so that we don't bombard them. We don't give them a lot of information that's going to create a lot of this uncomfortable, anxious feelings.
Shannon, what about Jem? I'm just curious, does he know about this?
Oh, yes.
He does.
I mean, as I'm hearing everybody talk, I'm going, I kind of did this all wrong. I was glued to it too. I couldn't look away, and I was on the phone talking about it, and my husband was away, and we were having conversations. I mean, when we found out everybody in our family we were in 3 different places, and that produces anxiety in me. I want to go home and have all of us be together.
Right.
Because I think about all those family members who were desperately dialing and not able to get a hold of their family members, and not knowing, did that mean that their family, I can't even go there. So I wanted to know where my family was instantly, and was talking to everybody, and he had already heard about it at school. They were already talking about it at school. We talked about it at home. He's learning about ISIS in his history class.
Really?
They are talking about it, and they just did a whole unit on the Muslim religion, and so they talked about the differences between the two, that these are not one and the same in class, and so we had quite the intensive conversation as it was all unfolding. I have seen in him some anxiety.
So you're thinking you might have done overkill.
Oh, yeah, but I don't know. I'll be honest with you. With him, I don't know, because he's getting it at school. I want to talk about it with him as well, so that he has an understanding. And because of his anxiety, and Vince, you're probably going to be like, well, that was exactly the wrong thing to do, but it's what I did. We talked about, because it's happened so many times now. He said, what would happen if that happened in my school? And I said, well,
okay.
or anywhere. And I said, well, let's talk about, they were talking about it on NPR about what are the traits that people have that survive. And somebody was saying that you run away. The people who run away, people who hide, and people who play dead are the ones that tend to have the best chance of surviving in these circumstances. So we talked about that.
But your child can process that. So Vince, you're telling us to be very careful about what your child can process. Wyatt's obviously, he's not as high functioning as Jim. And I mean, you know, I'm not saying that
No.
it's just the facts. And he processes differently too.
Yeah.
Vince,
Right.
one of the things that you can process any tragedy, and now let's move a little bit into personal situations.
Yeah.
When someone dies in the family, when a beloved pet dies, in the case of my situation, a parent chronically ill for many, many years and now facing, you know, very overwhelming illness. How do you deal with those situations with a child? How do you let them process when somebody is very sick or when someone is going to die?
Right. And with these situations, there, as you can see, there's a lot more of an emotional, a lot more of a direct connection to the child, right? The child knows the person or the animal. The child has a relationship with the person or the animal. And so they're going to experience similar grieving emotions that we feel when they're sick or they're injured or, you know, they do pass. So you want the child to be aware of their emotions and accepting of their emotions along the way. And to do this is to keep them involved in the process, explaining things to them of what's happening, explaining things to them, you know, what's going to happen next, giving some predictability to where things are going. Now, again, that goes all different places. You can, you know, it could ultimately be recovery and things are fine. It can result in a passing and a death. But keeping the child involved in expressing things to them so that they know what's going on along the process. With our kids, we know one of the hallmarks of autism is the inability to predict, the inability to think forward. And if we can help them with this, when the actual passing or the death happens, it's not as surprising to them. It's still traumatic, but it's not as surprising. They've been coached on it. We've talked about it. And plus, for kids who can ask questions, we've opened up several opportunities for them to ask questions so that we can help them understand it better.
And in fact, the sort of developing an obsession about death and dying can actually be their way of processing it?
Absolutely. And I think that's oftentimes what happens is they're processing the understanding of death. And so they're going to want to know more information about it. And then sometimes they get hooked on it because their anxiety is so high about what's going to occur or what possibly can occur in the future. And so that anxiety is going to oftentimes, you know, fuel or promote that behavior of wanting to know more information about that topic or about death, dying, germs, you know, whatever it may be. And so we process that with them, you know, keep it in a frame, keep it within context, and continue to give them that opportunity to process what's going on. So there's lots of ways to do that, depending on the situations at hand.
Right. Now, one of the things, as you are well aware of, is that Wyatt developed a very big fear surrounding getting older.
Right.
He associated getting older because when he asked people, why did BG die? Why did Papa die? Why did Grandmama die? Because they're getting older. And now he's asking me, is Daddy sick because he's old? And I'm saying, no, it's because he's sick. He has something called cancer,
Right.
which can make you very sick. So you came up with a way, you're coming up with some tools for Wyatt. Can you tell us a few of those tools? Because we're actually going to be working on some of them today with his supervisor.
Sure. Some of the things that we talked about was creating social stories, and so stories that are going to somewhat lay out the road of what's going on, in showing him what his behaviors or what his emotional responses are to be during these times. So again, when Daddy's in the hospital, or he's in his hospice care in his apartment, that this is where he lives now. This is where he's feeling. He looks forward to seeing you come. You know, when he goes to doctor's visits, this is what happens. When he's in treatment, this is what happens. So that he has an awareness of what's going on. Why Dad's not home? What is Dad doing? What is he doing instead of coming home? It takes some of that personal connection or it's not personal connection, but that sense of daddy doesn't want to be with us, daddy doesn't want to be here, those anxious feelings that are inappropriate, or not inappropriate, but inaccurate, right? So we wanted to replace those with, this is what dad's doing, this is where he is, this is where the doctors are, this is where his treatment is, and really using stories on, and you get to visit him on these days, and he looks forward to seeing you, and when you're together you'll do this, and we'll talk about this. It lays out what's going to happen, not only in the future, but how he's supposed to respond and process this as the process goes along.
Great. It's interesting because last night, I didn't tell you this, but we took Casey, our littler dog, over to the facility where Rita is now, and they have a house dog at this facility. They really believe in pet, therapy and everything. And so we took Casey over to meet Cody, and we took Casey into his father's room, and we were leaving, and he said, I want to leave Casey here. And I said, honey, we're going to take her home. Why do you want to leave her here? He said, to make daddy feel better.
Right. See, that's a good awareness, right? That's an extremely good emotional awareness, that he feels that daddy's alone, that we're not around daddy, and daddy needs someone to be with him.
Vince, I'm wondering, it's very present in my mind today. Today is the 3rd anniversary of my mom dying, and we were talking about that this morning. Jem brought it up. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about kiddos being at the bedside when, to say goodbye.
Thank you for asking.
Because, we got a message that my mother wasn't expected to live the weekend. We jumped on planes. We went immediately to the hospital. And so this was 3 years ago. So Jem was like 8.5. And we took him right up to the hospital. She was unconscious for that visit. And so he just got a look at her in the intensive care. And he was whisked away by daddy. He went home and that night spiked a fever and started throwing up. And they discovered that he had strep throat. And she was in intensive care. So, you know what, though? I will be honest with you. So my mother eventually woke up. She knew that she was going to die. And she wanted to see everybody to say goodbye. And she asked to see Jem. And I said, he's sick and he's infectious and they won't allow him on the floor. There's no way. And it was a hard line for me. Like, it would have jeopardized the other patients. And so I was able to say no. And he would have wanted to do it too, but I don't know how I would have felt. But I was grateful that he had strep throat because it made it a thing where there was no question, right? And I didn't have to make the hard choice.
I'm going through this right now, trying to make a determination about what we're going to do.
Right. And so what do you think, Vince?
It's really a family decision, right? I mean, everyone has their preference to, and again, it depends on the level of understanding for the child. If the child really going to understand what they're seeing, what they're doing, what they're participating in, versus will they not? Is it something that's going to create more confusion, anxiety, and uncomfortability by being there and not really knowing what's going on? Again, they're going to be very aware of how everyone in the room is feeling, how everyone in the room is emoting when a death happens or is going to happen. And if they don't have the capacity to really understand that, process that might be too hard for them. So I mean, there's a lot of variation that goes on the level of understanding for the kids when they're there. Now, when it comes to actually being there, in the person who is passing wants to see or say goodbye or wants them to be there, that's a family decision that can be played out by what we were talking about earlier, planning for it, planning to be there, understanding that they're going to be there when they step through the doors of heaven, or when they pass to a better life, or when they're whatever our beliefs are with the afterlife, we can explain that, and so that when it happens, they'll have some point of reference, some comprehensive understanding of what's happening at this point, and then what's going to happen afterwards, right? Daddy's not going to wake up, mommy's not going to come home, the dog, if it's a dog or a family pet, is going to be buried in the backyard or whatever it may be. Then they'll know that there's a procedure, a process, a next step that's going to happen. It's tough. I wish I had an answer for that tough decision, but there's a lot of variables that go into it that each family has to look at independently. I know when my mother passed, I was out of town, and when I came into town, I didn't want to see her.
Yeah.
They had kept her in the hospital for me to go see her, and I didn't. I just didn't want to see that, and so I think with everyone, the situations are different from expected to unexpected.
It's the whole thing sucks. Like you're in a
Yes.
circumstance.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, that was one of the things that Reed and I talked about when I saw him at the hospital the other day. I said, let's be clear. This sucks.
And I love that you were so honest with him, because the other thing that starts to happen is, and listen, we all pray for miracles and we all pray for healings, but there's a certain point where miracles, you're pretty sure that miracle is not going to happen.
Look, we all know that at some point we all have to go.
Right.
There's no miracle that ends that.
That's right. And in some cases, the well-meaning, there's this great cancer doctor in Mexico. It's past that point, and you want to say thank you, but just please pray for comfort and peace.
Right.
And so. But like you said, none of it's easy. We live in a culture that doesn't even talk about these things. It's hard enough with typical kids, much less with our kids, right, Vince?
Right, exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. Is it's typically a topic we don't talk about. We keep very personal, keep to our chest. We don't talk about it, and we actually should be doing the opposite. The more we talk about it, the more aware the children are with it, the better they're going to understand it, the better the process for them is going to be. Let's be clear. They're going to go through a grieving process, just as we are. It's going to be different. It might be, harder or easier, but the idea is they will grieve. They will. And it's my hope that we do more, information giving to them, or at least talking to them about it prior to it happening, if at all possible, so that we're giving them some foundation to understand what's going to happen, or what is happening if it's happening right now.
Well, and I guess my follow-up to that is, for me, when I'm around people that are grieving, my whole thing is let them do what they need to do. As long as it's not harmful to them or to other people's, let them do what they want to do. Do we backpedal at all with kids that are on the autism spectrum? If they need to engage in their STEM a little bit more to get through this process, I would think that we need to be a little bit more accepting. What do you think, Vince?
I think it's the same framework as what you just said. As long as it's not harming, hurting, or destroying anything, I think you're right. It's an anxious behavior. If they're going to be a little bit more stimmy, they're going to be a little bit more ritualistic. It's understandable. We understand that within our abilities as clinicians and parents to know that this is their anxiety. This isn't a regression in behavior. This isn't something that's permanent. This is a part of their process. And I think talking about it, for us, it helps because we can now also predict that these behaviors are going to go up.
Right. I mean, I get more, my OCD kicks in where I'm rearranging stacks of paper and I'm just doing things like that at the house because that's my stress level and my constant activity, which is a way of avoiding dealing. And so it makes sense that Wyatt's going to be doing his favorite STEM of splashing and or scripting and or watching the same video over and over, reverting to Thomas the Tank Engine. Those things are things that I shouldn't get particularly alarmed about, you're saying.
Right, correct. I mean, some of the things we can limit and try to not have access to if it's like videos and things like that we can actually physically remove. But if we're talking physical stimulatory behaviors or things that there's nothing that we can control or something that we can't control, like visual stims or things like that, we understand that. Not that we want to continue to accept it, we can redirect it, but it's not a negative. It's not something that the child's doing as non-compliance. It's not something the child's doing. We can understand this is an anxious, behavior, anxious result to the stimulus that's going on around us, right? To the grieving process that's going on, and we can understand that.
Okay. But so let's just clarify, because I think, but I'm somebody that I want to comfort people. If the Thomas the Tank Engine is what comforts him, I personally would be playing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week right now. But is that not productive for him down the road?
Right. That's not productive down the road. Now, you might use it as an intervention, here and there, but it's under your control, right? It's
Okay.
not under their
Okay.
control.
Right.
All
So
right.
you're the one that's able to dictate when it's needed and when it's not.
Yeah, and you don't want the regression to become a pattern. Like
Right.
finally Wyatt got out of coming in our bed in the middle of the night. Well, now that his dad's not been home, there's some nights where he says, "Mommy, can I sleep here where Daddy sleeps?" And there's a couple of nights where I've said that's okay because his therapists have said it's okay, but don't get in the pattern again because he'll weasel his way back in that bed.
Right.
Well, you want to keep as much normalcy as possible, right?
Right.
We can't stop. We don't just drop everything and say, okay, let it be. We have to keep the normalcy. We have to keep the expectations. We don't push for higher expectations. Absolutely, when we're not going to necessarily push for the same level of, let's say, of behavior compliance that he was at prior to the the trauma.
Right.
But we want to keep it as consistent as possible. Like I said earlier, we're still going to consecrate. Keep your hands down.
Right.
Give him something else to deal with.
Right.
To play with. Or you want to watch Thomas? Okay, we're going to watch Thomas once.
Right.
Because we know that's gonna calm. And
Okay.
we're okay with that. Like you said, you let him watch it. You say, okay,
Right.
now let's watch something else. Let's watch Spider-Man or whatever.
Right.
Another thing that we know that they're interested in, but it's still under control. We're
Right.
still using it. You can sleep here tonight. That's fine. That's great. I love, snuggles are great. But then tomorrow when he says it, no, tonight
your own bed.
is your big boy night. You
Wow.
sleep in your bed.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you,
we're
Vince.
running out of time.
We're running out of time.
We could
But
talk forever, but
We
go ahead.
could, but I just wanted to say thank you, Vince, proving yet again that why you are the licensed marriage and family therapist and why I just host a show.
Yeah, this brought up something, though, for me that I'd like to talk about when you're on next time, and that is some violent content and
Yeah.
violent videos and or things on the internet. I've caught Wyatt. There's one particular violent thing called Chuck E. Cheese Shootout. And he watches that, and So I want to talk about what to do when we catch our children. This is for a future show.
Oh, yes. No, we'll do that in January.
Okay.
That's a great topic.
Okay.
Vince, thank you so much. We want to wish
Thank
you
you,
happy
Vince.
holidays, happy New Year.
You too. Happy holidays to you guys. And if you ever need anything, let me know.
Okay,
We
thank
always
you.
need something, so we'll have you back on in January.
Thank you, Vince, so
Good.
much.
Thanks,
Take care.
Vince. Take care. We've only got a couple of minutes here to end the show, and I want to bring up the Sensitive Santa event
Yes, again.
And then you have an Autismo-y Familia happening on Thursday as well.
Yes, we
so
do.
These two events. So
Okay.
it's the 17th, correct? That's
Right.
the Autismo-y Familia.
And you can go to act-today.org and find out about that. It is for Spanish-speaking families. It is in downtown Los Angeles at the Children's Institute. It is an
Great
amazing
information.
resource. Yeah.
If you know people that are Spanish-speaking that need resources, send them, and they're in the Los
Right, we'll have
Angeles area.
Gabriela Tessier there on our board. It's just going to be jam-packed with information. Go ahead, Shannon.
And again, the Sensitive Santa event that we're having is happening on the 20th of December. It's happening at the We Rock the Spectrum that is in Tarzana. It's on Ventura Boulevard. You cannot go to it unless you register for tickets. Kelby has the address right there for you on the screen. I like being Carol Merrill. I wanted to be on The Price is Right. I was never thin enough. Anyway.
That dates you, Carol Merrill.
I know. Please.
Totally dates you. How
I
about
was saying
Vanna
today,
White?
This is my Maud
about Vanna
West.
White?
Yeah, Vanna White. No, please.
That even dates you.
I was going to say Vanna White is we're not even going there. But anyway, go register for tickets. Remember, your siblings can register for a ticket as well, so that they get a gift. Adults do not have to register. We're just taking a number of the people who are going to get in line to be with Santa and get a gift. So you must register, though. Please do not come to the event without a ticket, because then you'll make me cry. I don't want to have to turn anybody away. You must be registered to go. And there is a waiting list if tickets become available later on. So if you don't get a ticket, if it gets sold out, sign up to be on the waiting list. All right. And that is in conjunction with Act Today, Card, Skills, Autism-Live, We Rock the Spectrum, and My Brother Rocks the Spectrum.
Wow.
And we have some amazing gifts that have come. My office is full of fabulous gifts. We're having a great show tomorrow. Let me not forget to talk about this. Brian Turtle is going to be here from Endless Games tomorrow. And we did have the Autistic Genius on the show tomorrow, but I just got a message from him that I'm not sure if that's happening, but we're going to be talking toy tomorrow. So, and playing endless games. So you won't want to miss that. We're totally out of time. Until tomorrow, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.